Just when Amy Roloff thought she'd finally found her happily ever after, a ghost from Chris Marek's past has materialized with a threat so devastating it could cost them everything they've built. For years, viewers of Little People, Big World have watched Amy heal from a painful and public divorce, cautiously opening her heart again to a man who seemed to be her perfect match. Chris Marek, with his easy smile, his love for the open road, and his unwavering support for Amy, was presented as the ultimate second chance at love. But an explosive new report, backed by what insiders are calling irrefutable evidence, suggests that the man Amy married is not the man she thinks he is. A dark secret from his past, a secret with a name and a face, has now come forward with a shocking demand that threatens to shatter Amy's world and humiliate their family on a global stage. This isn't just about a past mistake. It's about a hidden life, a scandalous secret, and a $1 million blackmail threat that could tear their marriage apart forever. Before we dive into the shocking details of this unfolding crisis, if you are as invested in the Roloff family as we are and want to stay updated on every twist and turn, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss a single update. And give this video a thumbs up to let us know you want more of the stories that matter to the LPBW community. Your support helps us dig deeper to get the truth. To truly understand the magnitude of this betrayal, we have to rewind and appreciate the fairy tale that Amy and Chris presented to the world. Their love story was a beacon of hope for many. After the painful and protracted divorce from Matt Roloff, a saga that played out for millions of viewers, Amy was left to redefine her life. She was a single woman in her 50s, navigating the complexities of leaving the farm she had called home for 3 decades and rebuilding her identity outside of her role as Matt's wife. The farm, once a symbol of their family, had become a battleground of memories and resentments. Viewers saw her struggle, her tears, and her determination to find her own footing. Then, in walked Chris Marek. He wasn't part of the farm drama. He was an outsider, a successful real estate agent with a calm demeanor and a passion for motorcycle adventures. He was, in every sense, a breath of fresh air. Their courtship was a slow burn, a gentle journey of 2 mature individuals finding comfort and joy in each other's company. He was patient, kind, and seemed to genuinely adore Amy for who she was. He encouraged her independence, celebrated her cooking, and stood by her side as she navigated the often tense dynamics with her ex-husband. Their wedding in 2021, held at the very farm that held so many painful memories, was supposed to be the ultimate symbol of her triumph. It was Amy rewriting her own history, turning a place of past sorrow into a venue for future joy. She had finally found her partner, her confidant, her rock. Chris was the man who had helped her close a painful chapter and begin a beautiful new one. Their life together seemed idyllic, filled with motorcycle trips, cozy nights in their new home, and the simple joy of partnership. He was her escape from the drama, the steady hand she could hold, the quiet harbor after a long storm. But what if that harbor was never as safe as it seemed? What if the calm waters were concealing a dark and turbulent past that was always destined to surface? Looking back with the knowledge we have now, subtle clues and red flags, once dismissed as mere quirks, begin to paint a much more unsettling picture. Fans with a keen eye have often pointed out on social media forums and discussion boards that Chris Marek's history has always been something of an enigma. When he first appeared on the show, he was presented as a longtime bachelor, a man who had simply been waiting for the right person to come along. His life before Amy was painted in broad strokes. He sold real estate, he liked to ride motorcycles, and he enjoyed a good time with friends. But specific details were always conspicuously absent. Whenever questioned on camera, especially in the early days about serious past relationships or his life before moving to Oregon, Chris would often become visibly uncomfortable. He'd offer a vague, non-committal answer, a quick smile, and expertly change the subject. Remember the early episodes where Amy's friends would gently probe him about his dating history? His answers were always generic. "I've dated," he would say, "but never found the one." There was never a mention of a long-term live-in girlfriend, a broken engagement, or any of the significant romantic milestones one might expect from a man in his 50s. At the time, this was interpreted as him being a private person, a gentleman who didn't kiss and tell. Amy herself seemed to respect this, content with the man he was in the present, not needing to excavate his entire past. But sources close to the production now suggest that this vagueness was not born of privacy, but of a desperate need for concealment. One crew member speaking on the condition of anonymity revealed there was always a sense that there were topics you just didn't push with Chris. When the cameras were off, he was even more guarded. Any talk about his life back in the 90s, for instance, would cause an immediate shift in his demeanor. He'd clam up. We all just assumed he had a bad breakup or something, but we never imagined it was this. These nervous reactions, these carefully constructed walls around his history, were not just about protecting an old heartache. They were about protecting a lie that formed the very foundation of the life he was building with Amy. The official story sold to Amy and to the world was simple and appealing. Chris Marek was a successful, unencumbered bachelor who had spent his life building his career and enjoying his freedom, only to be swept off his feet by Amy Roloff in his later years. It was a romantic narrative that fit perfectly into the arc of Amy's second chance. The darker picture, however, as pieced together by insiders and sources close to Chris's estranged family, is far more complex and troubling. These sources allege that long before Chris became a familiar face on reality television, he lived a tumultuous and secretive life, one that he has meticulously hidden from everyone, including his own wife. He wasn't just a simple bachelor, claims one source, who purports to have known Chris in his younger years. He was ambitious, reckless, and caught up in a world that was all about appearances and power. According to this narrative, Chris's past involves a high-stakes business environment far from the sleepy suburbs of Portland, a world of intense competition and shadowy dealings. It was a life where secrets were a form of currency and cutting ties was a means of survival. This wasn't just about a few wild years after college. This was a sustained period of his life where he allegedly made choices with devastating consequences. Consequences he believed he had successfully buried forever. The man who now projects an image of a laid-back, easygoing homebody was, according to these reports, once a man who would do anything to get ahead, a man who left a trail of emotional and financial wreckage in his wake. Amy fell in love with the finished product, the calm and stable Chris Marek of today. She had no idea that this persona was allegedly a carefully constructed facade built upon the ruins of a past he was desperate to forget, a past that included broken promises, betrayed trust, and a secret he was willing to abandon to secure his own future. As we dig deeper, the unseen truth begins to emerge, and it centers on one person. A young man, now in his late 20s, who is the living embodiment of the secret Chris has guarded for nearly 3 decades. This is Chris Marek's alleged secret son. Our sources have pieced together the scandalous circumstances of his birth, a story of a passionate but forbidden affair. In the early 1990s, a younger, fiercely ambitious Chris Marek was allegedly involved with a woman connected to a powerful business rival. Their relationship was intense and clandestine, a dangerous game in a world where allegiances were everything. When she became pregnant, panic set in. The birth of a child would have exposed their affair, potentially destroying Chris's career prospects and causing a massive scandal. According to a source claiming to be a former confidant of the son's mother, Chris was pressured, both by his own ambition and potentially by outside forces, to walk away. He was given a choice: a future he had worked so hard for, or a family born from a forbidden romance. He allegedly chose his future. He vanished from their lives, cutting off all contact and leaving the woman to raise their child alone under a cloud of shame and secrecy. He provided no financial support, no emotional connection, no acknowledgement of his own flesh and blood. This wasn't a mutual, amicable decision. It was, as the source describes it, a cold and calculated act of abandonment. The son grew up knowing only that his father was a man who didn't want him, a ghost who had chosen success over his own child. For years, he and his mother struggled, while Chris went on to build a new life, a new identity, eventually landing in Oregon and reinventing himself as the carefree real estate agent we see today. But the past is never truly buried, and a son's search for answers and perhaps for justice was a ticking time bomb set to explode in the middle of Amy Roloff's perfect life. This story would be easy to dismiss as a vicious rumor if it weren't for the concrete evidence that has now been leaked by sources connected to the son. The first piece of evidence is a bombshell, a partially redacted paternity test. Our insider network has obtained a scanned copy of a laboratory report dated from the mid-1990s. While the names have been blacked out for legal reasons, the document clearly shows a DNA probability of paternity at 99.99%. The laboratory listed is a reputable facility from the city where Chris was allegedly living at the time. The document is said to have been commissioned by the mother shortly after the birth, confirming what she already knew, a desperate attempt to have proof should she ever need it. The second piece of evidence is a series of increasingly threatening emails allegedly sent from the son to Chris Marek's business email account over the past few months. We have been given access to transcripts of these messages. The first email, sent 3 months ago, is almost pleading. It reads, in part, "I know who you are. I know what you did. For years I've wondered, and now I have proof. I don't want to disrupt your life, but I deserve to know why." When this email apparently received no response, the tone shifted. A second email, sent a month later, is angry and accusatory. "You think you can just ignore me, live your happy life on television while my mother struggled? You owe us. You owe me an explanation, and you owe her for the life you stole." The final email, sent just a few weeks ago, is where the situation escalates to explicit blackmail. The message is short and chilling. "Ignoring me was your last mistake. You have one chance to make this right. $1 million. You will wire the money to an account I provide, and I disappear forever. If you refuse, or if you contact the police, my story, along with the paternity test and other evidence of your past, goes to every tabloid in the country. Your perfect life with your famous wife will be over. The choice is yours." To corroborate this threat, our sources have also uncovered flight records. A commercial flight manifest obtained through a deep web search of publicly available data confirms that an individual with the same name as the alleged son flew from his home city to Portland, Oregon on a one-way ticket just days after that final email was sent. The ghost from Chris's past was no longer a digital threat. He was in the same city, breathing the same air, and ready to bring Chris's carefully constructed world crashing down around him. The climax of this mounting pressure cooker of secrets and lies reportedly took place not in the comfort of Amy and Chris's home, but at Chris's place of work, his sanctuary of professional respectability. The confrontation was deliberately planned by the son to be off camera, away from the prying eyes of the reality show that had made his estranged father a household name. According to a source who spoke with a shaken employee at the real estate office, a young man fitting the son's description arrived without an appointment, insisting on speaking with Marek about a private family matter. Chris, who had been described as on edge for weeks, turned pale when he saw the man. He quickly ushered him into his private office and closed the door. While the conversation was not overheard, the tension was palpable. For nearly an hour, the two were closeted together. When the young man finally left, he did so with a look of cold determination. Chris, however, did not emerge from his office for a long time. When he finally did, he was described as looking utterly broken and a decade older. He canceled the rest of his appointments for the day and left abruptly. It was during that private, high-stakes meeting that the demand was made in person, $1 million in exchange for his science. The son allegedly laid out his terms with chilling clarity. He didn't just have the paternity test, he had more. He claimed to possess letters, sworn affidavits from old family friends, and potentially damaging financial records from Chris's other life that would not just prove his paternity, but would paint a picture of a ruthless, deceptive man. He would sell this entire package to the highest bidder, ensuring that the story would dominate the celebrity news cycle for months. It would destroy Chris's reputation, humiliate Amy, and tarnish the wholesome image of the Roloff family brand. Chris was trapped. Decades of lies had finally caught up to him, and the price of his past was a non-negotiable 7 figures. The immediate aftermath of this clandestine confrontation was a silent, agonizing drive home for Marek. The weight of his secret, now coupled with an impossible ultimatum, was too much to bear alone. He knew he could no longer shield Amy from the truth. That evening, in the quiet of their home, the very home that was supposed to be their peaceful sanctuary, Chris was forced to confess everything. According to a source extremely close to Amy, the scene was one of utter devastation. Chris, a man viewers have only seen as confident and cheerful, allegedly broke down completely. Through tears of shame and fear, he unburdened himself of the secret he had carried for 30 years. He told her about the affair, the pregnancy, the abandonment, and now the blackmail. For Amy, the confession was a physical blow. This wasn't just about a child she never knew existed. It was about the fundamental nature of the man she had married. The man she trusted, who had promised her a life of honesty and peace, had built their entire relationship on a foundation of monumental deceit. Her dream marriage was instantly turning into her worst nightmare. The source described Amy as being in a state of shock, cycling through waves of disbelief, hurt, and profound anger. "How could you lie to me for all these years? Who even are you?" she reportedly asked, her voice trembling with betrayal. The trust that had been the bedrock of their marriage was shattered in an instant. The crisis, however, did not allow them time to process the emotional fallout. The $1 million threat was real and the deadline was looming. In a desperate attempt to contain the scandal and prevent their lives from being publicly detonated, Chris and a devastated Amy have reportedly made a decision. They are going to pay. But coming up with that kind of money without raising suspicion is nearly impossible. Our insiders report that they are now in the process of secretly liquidating assets. Chris is said to be looking into leveraging his real estate holdings, while discussions have allegedly taken place about Amy quietly selling off some of her own investments, perhaps even her remaining stake in the farm. This financial strain, combined with the emotional cataclysm of the betrayal, has put an unbearable pressure on their new marriage. Every conversation is tense. Every glance is loaded with pain and suspicion. The man who was her escape from drama has now brought a Category 5 hurricane directly into her life, and the cost of his past may be their future. The confession has been made, the secret is out, but for Amy Roloff, the nightmare is only just beginning. The initial shock has now given way to a cold, pervasive reality that has infected every corner of her life. The home she and Chris built together, once a symbol of their shared future and a source of so much joy, now feels like a prison of whispers and unspoken accusations. The easy laughter that once filled their kitchen has been replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by tense, necessary conversations about logistics and finances. Amy finds herself looking at the man she sleeps next to each night and seeing a stranger. Every memory is now suspect, every shared story potentially a carefully curated piece of a larger. Was his love for her real, or was she just another part of his elaborate second act, a convenient and public way to solidify his reinvented identity as a wholesome family man? This question haunts her waking moments and fuels her sleepless nights. She is trapped in a devastating loop of emotional whiplash. One moment, she sees the terrified, broken man who confessed his sins to her, and a flicker of pity, perhaps even love, remains. The next, she is consumed by a white-hot rage, a sense of profound and utter foolishness. She, Amy Roloff, who had her heart publicly broken and who cautiously, painstakingly rebuilt her life, had she walked willingly into another trap? Had she been so desperate for a happy ending that she ignored the signs, the convenient gaps in his life story that now seem like gaping chasms of deceit? The pain of this betrayal is compounded by the sickening parallels to her past. For years, her narrative was defined by her struggles with Matt. Their divorce was a slow, painful unraveling of communication, respect, and shared dreams. But as difficult as that was, it was a death by 1,000 cuts, a partnership that eroded over time under the pressures of family, business, and fame. This, with Chris, feels different. It feels more sinister. This wasn't a slow erosion, it was a foundational lie, a deliberate act of concealment from the very beginning. Chris had presented himself as the anti-Matt. He was the simple, straightforward, drama-free partner. He was her safe harbor. That was his entire appeal. The irony is so cruel, it's almost laughable. She fled a complicated history with one man only to discover her new husband was hiding a past more scandalous than she could have ever imagined. The public humiliation she fears is almost unbearable to contemplate. How would this look to her children, to Zach, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob, who had finally embraced Chris as a stable, loving presence in their mother's life? How would she explain that the man she had championed, the man she had defended, had been lying to all of them? And then there's Matt. She can already picture the look on his face, a mixture of pity and a subtle, unspoken, "I told you so." After all the years of tension and arguments over honesty in the farm, for Amy to be embroiled in a scandal of this magnitude would be a humbling blow, shifting the dynamics of their entire post-divorce relationship. She feels utterly alone, isolated by a secret that is not her own, but that threatens to define her future. And the secret is so much bigger than just an abandoned child. As more details come to light from our insider sources, it becomes clear that the $1 million demand isn't just hush money for a paternity secret. It's the price for burying Chris Marek's entire former life. The son, armed with a lifetime of his mother's stories and a cache of her meticulously kept records, is not just threatening to expose a father, he's threatening to expose a ruthless operator. According to these emerging reports, the affair with the son's mother was not merely a passionate mistake. It was allegedly a calculated infiltration. In the cutthroat world of high-end commercial real estate in another state, decades ago, Chris was a rising star, but he was an outsider. The woman he became involved with was the daughter of a major competitor, a man whose firm Chris was desperate to outperform. The relationship allegedly gave him access, insights, and information he used to his professional advantage. When she became pregnant, the asset became a liability. The child was not just an inconvenience, it was proof of a deeply unethical and potentially career-ending betrayal. His decision to vanish was, therefore, not just the act of a scared young man, but the cold, strategic move of a corporate predator covering his tracks. The evidence the son possesses is said to include not only love letters that detail their affair, but also notes and journals kept by his mother that allude to the business secrets Chris was so eager to learn. It paints a picture of a man who used emotional connection as a tool for corporate espionage. This is the truth that Chris is terrified of. It wouldn't just make him look like a bad father. It would expose him as a fraud, a man whose success was built on deception. It would destroy his professional reputation in Portland and obliterate the good guy image he has so carefully cultivated on national television. This terrifying new context explains the frantic desperation behind their decision to pay the blackmail. Amy and Chris are now caught in a logistical nightmare, a race against time to gather a life-altering sum of money without raising a single red flag. The process is tearing them apart. Every financial discussion is a fresh wound. Chris, stripped of his easy confidence, is now completely reliant on Amy, both for her emotional support and, crucially, for her assets. He has reportedly exhausted his own liquid funds and is struggling to secure a loan against his real estate business without providing a reason that would invite scrutiny. The pressure has now fallen squarely on Amy. She is being forced to consider selling pieces of her own hard-won independence to clean up a mess from a life she never even knew her husband lived. Insiders speak of a massive argument that took place just days ago. Chris, in a moment of desperation, allegedly suggested she approach Matt about buying her remaining stake in the farm outright, a move that would generate the cash they need quickly. For Amy, this suggestion was the ultimate insult. The farm is the last symbol of her own legacy, her history, her identity. The thought of going to Matt, hat in hand, to secretly finance a blackmail payment for her new husband's secret past was so humiliating, it was nauseating. "You want me to sell my history to pay for yours?" she reportedly screamed, the betrayal fresh and raw. "You want me to go to my ex-husband and ask him to bail us out of a mess you made 30 years ago because you lied to me?" The fight, sources say, ended in a stalemate, with Amy feeling more trapped than ever. She is being asked to sacrifice her financial security, her pride, and her legacy, all to protect the reputation of a man she is no longer sure she even knows. The immense strain is beginning to show, and the children are starting to notice. While they are being kept in the dark about the specifics, they are not blind to their mother's distress. A source close to the family described a recent phone call between Amy and Zach. Zach, ever the observant and caring son, apparently called to check in, having sensed a distance in his mother's recent texts. During the call, he asked if everything was all right, noting that she sounded tired and stressed. Amy, forced to lie, brushed it off as work and planning for the holidays. But the lie was heavy in her voice, and Zach was reportedly not convinced. He later mentioned to Tori that something is wrong with Mom and Chris, speculating that they might be having marital problems. This is Amy's worst fear realized. The poison of Chris's secret is now seeping into her most precious relationships. The secrecy is forcing her to build walls around herself, isolating her from the very support system she needs most. She is on an island of deceit with Chris, and the water is rising. She can't confide in her best friends, Lisa or Deb, because telling them would make the betrayal real in a new way, and she isn't ready to hear their judgment, however well-intentioned. Every "how are you, family?" from a friend feels like a loaded question. Every social interaction a performance. She is an actress in the play of her own life, pretending that her world isn't crumbling around her. As Amy struggles with her isolation, one can only speculate on the potential fallout should this story ever break. The public relations disaster would be unprecedented for the Roloff family. Tabloid headlines would be brutal: Amy's marriage a sham, Roloff husband's secret son and scandalous past revealed. Talk shows would dissect every moment of their on-screen relationship, searching for clues she might have missed. And Matt Roloff would be thrust right back into the center of the narrative. While he would undoubtedly release a public statement of support for Amy and the family, the private dynamics would be irrevocably altered. In a strange way, it would validate his own choices, particularly his relationship with Karen Chandler, which has often been scrutinized by fans. He and Corinne have been open, for the most part, about their history. For Amy, who has often been perceived by a segment of the audience as taking the higher moral ground, to be caught in a scandal built on such a deep and personal lie would be a dramatic reversal of fortunes. It would be a humbling, painful chapter that would force the entire family to reevaluate their public and private personas. Meanwhile, the architect of this misery, the secret son, remains a shadowy figure, but our sources have uncovered a tragic new dimension to his motivations. It is now believed that his actions are fueled by more than just greed. They are fueled by grief and a twisted sense of justice. It has been reported that his mother passed away within the last year after a long and expensive battle with a debilitating illness. She died in debt, having exhausted her savings on medical treatments. The son, who was her sole caretaker, witnessed her struggle firsthand. He now sees the $1 million not as blackmail, but as reparations. It is the money he feels his mother was owed for a lifetime of raising a child alone, the money that could have given her better care and more comfort in her final days. In his mind, he is not destroying a stranger's life for profit. He is collecting a debt from the man who destroyed his mother's. This doesn't excuse his actions, but it does cast them in a more complex and tragic light. He is a man acting from a place of profound loss and long, simmering rage, making him a far more dangerous and unpredictable adversary. He believes he has nothing left to lose. Amy is now standing on the precipice of an impossible choice, and the deadline is drawing near. The money is not yet secured. The tension is at an all-time high. Her marriage is hanging by a thread. Does she go through with it? Does she drain her accounts, sell her assets, and pay the $1 million to bury the past and stand by the man she married, hoping that they can somehow rebuild trust from the ashes of this catastrophe? Or does she make a different choice? Does she refuse to pay? Does she call his bluff and let the son go to the tabloids, choosing to face the public humiliation head on rather than be financially and emotionally bled dry by a lie? This path would mean the end of her marriage, the end of the life she thought she was building, but it might also be the only path back to her own truth, to her own integrity. It is a choice between preserving a fractured fairy tale and reclaiming her own story, no matter how painful the fallout. The happy ending she thought she had finally found has dissolved into the most difficult question of her life. What is the true price of a secret, and is it a price she is willing to pay? The clock is ticking, and Amy Roloff's future will be decided by her answer. Should she save her husband, or should she save herself? Comment below with what you think Amy should do, and make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, because we will be following this story every step of the way and will bring you the next update as soon as it breaks. The ticking clock on the blackmail demand has become the soundtrack to Amy Roloff's shattered life. Every passing hour brings her closer to a deadline that feels less like a financial transaction and more like a final judgment on her marriage. The weight of this crisis is visible to those who know how to look. On a recent Instagram post, a seemingly innocent photo of her and Chris smiling on a weekend outing, eagle-eyed fans flooded the comments with concern. "Amy, you look tired," one wrote. Is everything okay? Your smile doesn't reach your eyes. They have no idea. They see a woman, perhaps a little weary from a busy schedule, not a woman who is being systematically dismantled from the inside out by the greatest betrayal of her life. The public facade is the heaviest burden of all. She is expected to be Amy Roloff, the resilient matriarch, the successful cookbook author, the newlywed basking in the glow of a second chance. But privately, she is a hostage in her own home, chained to a man whose past is actively destroying their present. The nights are the worst, sleep offers no escape, only a different kind of torture. She finds herself replaying every moment of her relationship with Chris, searching for the tells she missed. She remembers a trip they took early in their courtship, a drive down the coast. She had asked him point blank if he had any big regrets in his life. She remembers him getting quiet, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. He looked out at the ocean and said, "Everyone has things they wish they'd done differently. I just try not to look in the rearview mirror." At the time, she found his answer mature and forward-thinking. Now, it sounds like the carefully rehearsed evasion of a lifelong con man. Was anything he ever told her true? His stories of a simple, unattached life, of waiting for the right person, were they all just part of a meticulously crafted cover story? She is grieving not just the trust that has been lost, but the man she thought she married. That man, she now realizes, may have never existed at all. He was a character, and she was his unsuspecting audience. The pressure from the outside world is also mounting in subtle, unnerving ways. According to a source close to Matt and Corinne, Corinne recently expressed a strange concern to Matt. She had run into Chris at a local store, and his appearance had startled her. "He looked like he'd seen a ghost, Matt," she reportedly said. "He was distracted, he'd lost weight, and when I asked him how things were going, he just mumbled something and practically ran away. It wasn't like him at all." This small observation, this ripple from the secret crisis, has put Matt on a low level of alert. He and Amy may have a fraught history, but he is still the father of her children, and he still possesses a protective instinct towards the family unit. He is now watching from a distance, a new variable in an already volatile equation. Amy can feel his gaze, even from across the farm, and the thought of him discovering the truth is a secondary but still potent source of dread. The idea of Matt knowing that her perfect new husband was a fraud, that her escape from the Roloff drama had led her into an even bigger one, is a humiliation she can barely stomach. The financial pressure, meanwhile, has become a suffocating, tangible thing. After their explosive fight, Amy agreed to at least explore her options. She made a clandestine appointment with a financial advisor in a neighboring town using a different name. The meeting was a brutal splash of cold water. As the advisor laid out the statements and spreadsheets, Amy was confronted with the physical reality of what she stood to lose. Liquidating her stock portfolio would trigger a massive tax event. Selling her rental properties would take time and attract unwanted attention. The advisor, unaware of the real reason for the consultation, kept suggesting long-term strategies, while Amy just needed $1 million in untraceable cash, and she needed it yesterday. The conversation circled back again and again to the one asset that was both valuable enough and liquid enough: her remaining share of Roloff Farms. The advisor noted that a private sale to a co-owner, like her ex-husband, would be the quickest and cleanest way to generate the necessary capital. Amy left the meeting feeling sick. The path of least resistance led directly through the one person she wanted to avoid at all costs. The blackmail was no longer just about Chris's secret. It was now a direct threat to her own hard-won financial independence and her last tangible link to her family's legacy. Feeling powerless and cornered, a switch flipped inside Amy. The victim mentality began to recede, replaced by a slow-burning, determined anger. If she was going to potentially sacrifice everything she had built to clean up this man's mess, she would not do it blindly. She needed to understand who she was dealing with. She needed to know the face of the man who held her future in his hands. And so, in the dead of night, fueled by coffee and a desperate need for control, Amy Roloff became a private investigator. She started with the fragments of information Chris had given her during his confession: a first name, an approximate age, a city. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She fell down a rabbit hole of social media deep dives and public records searches. Using ancestry websites and online white pages, she cross-referenced what little she knew. After hours of painstaking work, she found him: a single public profile on a professional networking site. And there he was, a young man with a serious expression, dark hair, and eyes that, if she looked hard enough, held a faint, unsettling echo of her husband's. Seeing his face was a jolt. He was real. This wasn't some abstract threat. It was a person, a life. Digging deeper, she found links to his late mother's social media. Her page was a heartbreaking digital memorial filled with posts from friends and family mourning her passing. And there, amidst the condolences, Amy found what she was looking for: articles and fundraising links detailing the mother's long, brutal fight with cancer. She read about the astronomical cost of her experimental treatments, the mounting debt, the pleas for community support. It was all there in black and white. The son wasn't just a greedy opportunist. He was a grieving child who had watched his mother die, likely believing that the money his father had denied them could have saved her. The discovery didn't absolve the son's actions, but it colored them with a layer of tragedy that Amy could not ignore. She now understood the rage that was driving him. It was the rage of a powerless child who had finally found a way to hurt the man he blamed for a lifetime of hardship and a final, devastating loss. Armed with this new, terrible understanding, Amy confronted Chris again. This was not the hysterical, emotional fight of the week before. This was a cold, quiet interrogation. She sat him down at the kitchen table and laid out a single printed photo of the son's face. Chris flinched as if he'd been struck. "I know about his mother," Amy said, her voice devoid of warmth. "I know she was sick. I know she died in debt. Is this what you were hiding? Is this what you were running from? Not just a child, but a woman you left to struggle and die while you were here playing the part of the happy husband?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, Chris seemed to completely deflate. The last of his defenses crumbled. He confessed the whole sordid story, not just the affair, but the corporate espionage, the calculated cruelty of his departure, the deliberate choice to erase them from his life to protect his career. He admitted that he had followed her life from a distance over the years through anonymous online searches. He knew she had struggled, he knew she had gotten sick, and he had done nothing. He was a coward, and he knew it. The confession was everything Amy had suspected, and hearing it aloud in the sterile silence of their kitchen was both validating and soul-crushing. She now had the complete, ugly truth. The question was, what was she going to do with it? The moral calculus had shifted. This was no longer just about protecting her marriage or her reputation. It was about a profound generational injustice. Paying the blackmail felt like participating in the original sin, using money to once again make a problem disappear. It felt like Chris's solution, not hers. But refusing to pay and allowing the story to break felt like a punishment that would fall disproportionately on her and her children, while Chris, the architect of the whole disaster, would simply become a public villain. There seemed to be no clean path, no choice that didn't involve a devastating compromise. And it was in that moment of impossible clarity that an unthinkable idea began to form in her mind. There was only one person in her life who had experience with high-stakes negotiations, with public scandals, and with complex, ugly financial entanglements. There was only one person who, for all their faults, understood the mechanics of the world she now found herself in. She had to talk to Matt. Not for money, not for a bailout, but for strategy. The thought was repulsive. It felt like the ultimate defeat, a surrender of her independence on the grandest scale. But it was also the only move she could see on the chessboard that offered any chance of changing the outcome of the game. Before she could act on this desperate impulse, the sun made the next move. An email arrived in Chris's inbox, but this one was different. There was no text, just a link to a small, obscure celebrity gossip blog. The headline of the post was cryptic: LPBW shocker. Insider hints at buried family secret for one of the show's stars. The post itself was vague, citing an anonymous source who claimed that a major cast member's spouse was hiding a past that would shock fans to their core. It named no names, but the timing was unmistakable. It was a warning shot, a demonstration of capability. The Sun was showing them that he was one click away from pulling the trigger and sending this story to the major media outlets. The deadline was no longer an abstract date on the calendar. It was now. The message was clear: pay now, or this is just the beginning. The blog post, though small, started a tiny tremor in the online fan community. The fuse had been lit. The blog post was the final catalyst. Amy knew she was out of time. That evening, she did the unthinkable. She called Matt and asked if he could meet her at the farm alone. She told him it was about some complex business decisions and she needed his advice. The tension during that meeting, held in the old, dusty farm office where they had argued 1,000 times before, was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amy, struggling to keep her composure, did not confess the entire story. She couldn't. Instead, she presented a hypothetical scenario. Imagine, Matt, she began, her voice shaking slightly, that someone from Chris's past had a financial claim against him, a significant one, from a business deal that went bad a long, long time ago. And imagine that this person was threatening to create a public scandal if they weren't paid. Matt, ever the pragmatist, listened intently, his expression unreadable. He asked sharp, probing questions about the nature of the claim and the evidence the other party might have. Amy was vague, but Matt was able to read between the lines. He understood that this was not a simple business dispute. "Amy," he said finally, his voice low and serious, "whatever this is, you have to understand that people who make threats like this don't just go away. Paying them once often just shows them you're willing to pay again." He advised her to get a lawyer, a specialist in crisis management, and to consider the long-term consequences of whatever she did next. He didn't offer a solution, but he offered a perspective she desperately needed, one detached from the emotional chaos she was living in. Leaving the farm, Amy felt a strange sense of resolve. Matt's cold, logical assessment had cut through her fear. He was right. There was no easy way out. She couldn't pay her way out of a moral crisis. She couldn't hide. She had to face it. That night, she made her decision. She sent an email, not from Chris's account, but from her own. It was addressed to the Sun. The message was short. "I am Amy Marek, Chris's wife," she wrote. "I am not going to wire you any money, but I am willing to meet you, alone. You and me. You can tell me your story, and I will listen. Then we can talk about what happens next." She proposed a time and a place, a quiet, neutral coffee shop in a town halfway between Portland and where he was staying. She hit send before she could lose her nerve. She was taking back control. She was no longer going to be a supporting character in the story of her husband's secret. She was stepping into the center of the ring. For the rest of the night and into the next day, there was no reply. The silence was agonizing. Chris was a nervous wreck, begging her to retract the offer, convinced she was walking into a trap. But Amy was resolute. Then an email notification chimed. It was a one-word reply: accepted. The day of the meeting, the sky over Oregon was a steel gray canvas. Amy drove herself, her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She had told Chris not to come, that his presence would only escalate things. This had to be between her and the ghost from his past. She arrived at the coffee shop early and chose a small, secluded booth in the back corner. Every time the bell on the door chimed, her heart leaped into her throat. She sat there for what felt like an eternity, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in front of her. She was about to give up, to believe it was all a cruel game, when the bell chimed one last time. She looked up and saw a young man walk in. He scanned the room, his eyes dark and intense, and then they locked with hers. He had her husband's jawline and his mother's sorrowful eyes. He hesitated for a moment and then began to walk slowly, deliberately toward her booth. He stopped at the edge of the table, a towering figure of anger and grief, the living embodiment of a 30-year-old secret. Amy held her breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. He opened his mouth to speak, the first words of a confrontation that would define the rest of her life. He sat down in the booth opposite her, the worn vinyl sighing under his weight. He didn't offer a greeting. He just stared, his eyes a mixture of forensic curiosity and raw contempt. This was the woman living the life that should have, in part, belonged to his mother. The woman who had unknowingly reaped the benefits of his father's first and greatest act of betrayal. "You're brave, I'll give you that," he said finally, his voice low and steady, laced with an unnerving calm. "Or maybe just stupid. I haven't decided yet." Amy met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. She saw the pain beneath the anger, the lost little boy inside the threatening man. "My name is Amy," she said, her own voice quiet but firm. "I thought it was time we actually spoke instead of communicating through threats and anonymous blog posts." A bitter, humorless smile touched his lips. "Threats get results. It got you here, didn't it? Let's not pretend this is a friendly chat over coffee. You're here because my father is a coward, and you're here to negotiate the price of his secret. So let's talk price." But Amy didn't take the bait. She didn't open her purse or start talking about money. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her expression softening from one of confrontation to one of profound empathy. "Before we talk about anything else," she said, "I want to say something. I've read about your mother. I saw the articles about her illness, and I am so sorry for your loss. I can't imagine the pain of watching someone you love go through that." The son was visibly taken aback. This was not the reaction he had expected. He had anticipated denial, anger, negotiation, perhaps even a threat of her own. He had not prepared for compassion. His carefully constructed wall of righteous anger developed a hairline crack. "Don't," he said, his voice suddenly thick with emotion. "Don't you dare talk about my mother. You know nothing." "You're right, I don't," Amy replied gently. "I never had the chance to know her, and from what I've learned, that was my loss. But I know what it's like to be a mother. I know what it's like to fight for your children. And I know she must have been an incredible woman to raise a son like you on her own." The crack in his armor widened. He looked away, out the window at the gray, drizzling sky, his jaw working silently. Amy pressed on, her voice filled with a sincerity that was impossible to fake. "What Chris did," she said, the name of her husband sounding like a foreign object in her mouth, "was unforgivable. There is no excuse. There is no justification. He abandoned his child, and he abandoned the woman who was carrying his child. He chose himself, he chose his career, and he built his life, our life, on that rotten foundation. Nothing you say to me about him will be worse than what I am already thinking. I want you to know that. I'm not here to defend him." This was the turning point. By siding with the truth, By validating his pain and his mother's struggle, Amy had completely changed the dynamic of the conversation. She had transformed herself from the enemy's wife into a potential ally, another victim of Chris's deceit. The son looked back at her, the hard mask of the blackmailer slipping to reveal the face of a grieving man. She waited her whole life, he said, his voice cracking. She thought maybe one day he'd show up. For a birthday, a graduation. When she got sick, I think a part of her thought, now he'll have to help. But he never came. I used the last of our money on a private investigator a few years ago, found out where he was, saw him on your show, smiling, riding his motorcycle, living this perfect life while she was fading. The money isn't for me, it's for her. It's the money that could have paid for that one last experimental treatment, the money that could have let her die without the debt collectors calling every day. It's the justice she never got. He finally laid it all bare, the raw, ugly heart of his motivation. It was never just about the money. It was about the fundamental injustice of it all. Amy listened to every word, letting his grief and rage wash over her. She didn't interrupt. She just nodded, her eyes filled with unshed tears. When he was finished, a heavy silence fell over the table. "You're right," Amy said finally. "It is an injustice, a terrible one, and $1 million wired to an anonymous account won't fix it. It'll make you a criminal, it'll make me a victim, and it will allow Chris to once again buy his way out of a problem without ever having to truly face it. It's his solution all over again. Pay and make it go away." She leaned in, her gaze intense. "So I'm going to make you a counteroffer. It's not the offer you want, but I believe it's the one your mother would have wanted." The son looked at her, confused and intrigued. "First," Amy said, "there will be money, not as blackmail, but as a formal legal settlement. We will call it what it is, 30 years of retroactive child support with interest, plus damages for emotional distress and abandonment. We will have lawyers draw it up. It will be a significant sum, enough to clear your mother's debts and secure your future. It will be an official acknowledgement of his financial responsibility. It will be on paper. It will be real." She paused, letting that sink in. "Second," she continued, "and this is the non-negotiable part, he has to face you, not me, not a lawyer, him. He will sit in a room with you and he will listen to whatever you have to say. He will answer your questions and he will apologize. He will look his son in the eye and finally, after 30 years, take responsibility for what he did." And then she delivered the final, most unexpected part of her offer. "And third," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "we will start a foundation in your mother's name. A small one to start, to help single mothers who are struggling with medical debt. He will provide the seed money, and I will lend my name and my platform to help it grow. Her name will not be a secret. Her struggle will not be for nothing. It will become a legacy of helping others. That is my offer. Justice, not just cash." The son was speechless. He stared at Amy, this small woman with an iron will who had just taken his ugly, desperate plan and transformed it into something that looked terrifyingly like redemption. It was more than he could have ever imagined. It was accountability. It was a legacy. It was everything his mother deserved. The anger in his eyes was replaced by a profound, weary sadness. He had carried this burden of hate for so long, and in the space of an hour, this woman had offered him a way to finally put it down. He nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." Amy returned home a different woman. The fear and uncertainty had been replaced by a cold, hard clarity. She walked into the house to find Chris pacing the living room like a caged animal. He rushed toward her, his face a mask of anxiety. "What happened? Are you okay? Did he hurt you? He asked, reaching for her. Amy took a step back, holding up a hand to stop him. The gesture was more powerful than a slap. It created an invisible wall between them, a boundary he was not welcome to cross. "We're not being blackmailed anymore," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I have made a deal." She proceeded to lay out the terms of her agreement with his son. She told him about the legal settlement, the face-to-face meeting, and the foundation in his ex-lover's name. She spared no detail, her words like precise surgical cuts. Chris listened, his initial relief turning to dawning horror. This was so much worse than just paying money. This was a life sentence of accountability. "A foundation?" he stammered. "A meeting? Amy, I can't." "You can't?" Amy's voice was dangerously quiet. "You can't? After what you've done? After the life you've allowed me to build on a pile of your lies? You don't have a choice anymore, Chris. Your choices ran out 30 years ago when you got on a plane and left a pregnant woman to fend for herself. From now on, the choices are mine." She looked at him, and for the first time he saw not the loving, forgiving Amy, but a woman made of steel. "These are the terms," she said. "You will do every single thing I have promised him you will do. You will liquidate whatever you must to fund the settlement and the foundation. And you will sit in that room with your son and you will take whatever he gives you. And if you refuse, if you hesitate for even 1 second, then our marriage is over. I will walk away and I will let him burn your entire world to the ground. I will not be a victim of your past, and I will not be your co-conspirator. This is your one and only path to redemption. You can take it or you can lose everything. It's up to you." Chris looked into her eyes and saw that she meant every word. He collapsed onto the sofa, a broken man, and nodded his assent. The power dynamic in their marriage had not just shifted, it had been completely and irrevocably reversed. The weeks that followed were a quiet, methodical execution of Amy's plan. Lawyers were hired, documents were drafted, confidentiality agreements signed. A significant portion of Chris's real estate portfolio was sold off, the transactions handled with discretion. Amy contributed funds from her own savings, framing it not as a gift, but as an investment in their now fragile future. Then came the day of the meeting. It was held in a neutral therapist's office, a sterile room with 2 chairs and a box of tissues. Amy drove Chris there but did not go inside. This was his reckoning alone. According to sources who later learned of the encounter, the meeting was brutal. The son, armed with a lifetime of pain, did not hold back. He described his mother's struggles, her loneliness, her painful death. He asked the unanswerable questions. "Why? Didn't you ever wonder about me? Didn't you ever care?" Chris, stripped of all his defenses, could do nothing but listen and weep. He apologized, not with excuses, but with the simple, devastating truth: "I was a coward. I was selfish, and I am sorry. I am so sorry." It was not a magical moment of healing. A 30-year wound cannot be closed in a single afternoon. But it was a beginning. It was an acknowledgement. When Chris walked out of that office, he was paler, thinner. But for the first time, he was no longer a man running from his past. The aftermath has settled into a new, fragile normal for Amy and Chris. The fairy tale is over. The easy, carefree love they once shared is gone, replaced by something more somber, more deliberate. Their marriage is now a conscious act of rebuilding, brick by painful brick. There are moments of quiet tenderness, but they are punctuated by long stretches of silence where the ghosts of the past still linger in the room. Amy looks at Chris and sees both the man she loves and the stranger who betrayed her. Trust is not a switch that can be flipped back on. It is something she must decide to offer in small increments every single day. Their finances have taken a significant hit, and they live a more modest life now, a constant, tangible reminder of the price of his secrets. The foundation in his late lover's name exists, a quiet testament to the strange, painful path they have taken. Amy finds a sense of purpose in it, a way to create something good from the wreckage. Chris's relationship with his son is tentative, consisting of occasional stilted text messages. It is not a father-son bond, but the fragile connection of two strangers trying to make sense of a shared trauma. There is no happy ending here, not in the traditional sense. There is only the quiet, difficult work of living with the consequences, of trying to build a future on the ruins of the past. Amy Roloff did not get the second chance at love she thought she had found. Instead, she got a second chance at strength, at resilience, and at defining her own life, not as a victim, but as a survivor. And so we are left with the question that hangs over it all. Did Amy do the right thing? By taking control, she saved her husband's reputation and kept her family from the center of a devastating public scandal. But in doing so, she has chained herself to a man who committed the ultimate betrayal. Is this strength, or is it a form of self-sacrifice she will one day come to regret? Could you stand by your partner after a lie of this magnitude, or is this a betrayal that no amount of atonement can ever truly heal? Let us know what you would have done in Amy's shoes in the comments below. This has been one of the most shocking and complex stories to ever emerge from the world of Little People, Big World, and we will continue to watch for any new developments. To make sure you don't miss out, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and click the notification bell for all the latest insider news and analysis. Thank you for watching.